I loved the HarmonicDyne Athena when I first reviewed it, that's them there, and it's been one of my top recommendations for anybody looking for a great budget headphone, particularly if they're looking for a more closed or semi-closed approach. And so I was surprised to see when HarmonicDyne released the new Black Hole headphone that it looks very similar, but it comes in cheaper. And I was a bit worried that they just superseded their very own Athena with a cheaper version that had exactly the same tuning. But as it turns out, there is a reason for the Black Hole to exist separate from the Athena, and so let me talk to you about what that is today. Before we get into that though, it's worth knowing a bit more about the Black Hole. These are a semi-closed headphone just like the Athena. They use a dynamic driver, a 50mm dynamic driver, and they come in at just $99 US, making them very, very affordable. The specifics of the driver is that they're using a composite of materials including carbon fiber and a biocellulose, I believe. I didn't get into a lot of detail researching that because every single driver has its own claims to why it's better than anything else, but in reality they're all just different approaches with pros and cons. The specs of that driver and therefore the overall headphones are that it gives you a 32 ohm impedance and a sensitivity of 110 decibels per volt. And this is interesting, we're starting to see more and more manufacturers do their sensitivity specifications in decibels per volt, and you need to be a little bit aware of that. Because if you're used to looking at decibels per milliwatt, the voltage figures are much higher for lower sensitivity. And what I mean by that is a 110 decibel per volt sensitive headphone like this one is actually only a 95 decibel per milliwatt headphone. And so if you're used to seeing 95 decibels per milliwatt and thinking that's very sensitive, then when you see 110, it may look incredibly sensitive, but if it's in volts, it's not really. So make sure you check if it's decibels per volt or decibels per milliwatt. Sometimes manufacturers don't actually tell us at all. That's a bit of a shame because then you don't know what you're working with. But in terms of headphones, if you're getting above 100 decibels of sensitivity, it's probably in volts. And if all of those numbers mean nothing at all to you, don't worry too much. All you need to know is that the Black Hole is very easy to drive. You can get these to very dangerous listening levels with just about 32 milliwatts. And so they'll be happily run by dongles, smartphones, laptops, obviously desktop devices, larger portable devices like digital audio players. They'll all handle the Black Hole, no problems at all. And so we should jump in and talk about how these sound. But first I want to say a really quick thank you to Linsol, who's both the channel sponsor here on Passion for Sound, but also who sent out these headphones. And if you've watched some of my other reviews of products sent to me by Linsol, you'll know that their sponsorship has no influence over what I say about their products. I've had plenty of IEMs and headphones that Linsol have sent to me that I really haven't enjoyed. So it doesn't mean that they're going to get a good review just because of the sponsorship. However, I can say that I do quite like the Black Holes. When you first put these on and start listening to them, I think the thing that most people are going to notice is they've got quite a full sense of bass. I don't know that I'd go so far as saying that they're a bass monster headphone or a bass head headphone, but I do think they've got a bit of extra emphasis down low, and that can be good for some, not so much for others. What their overall tuning results in is kind of a slightly thick sound, and a sound that's also a little bit V-shaped. You've got some bass emphasis, you've got some treble emphasis, and you've got a bit of a suck out in the upper mid-range area. Again, much like the Athena, and probably because they're using the same semi-closed damping design, the staging from the Black Hole is excellent for a semi-closed back headphone. And it is important to call these a semi-closed back. They're not fully sealing you in. And so that brings both the benefit of being able to produce staging that's closer to an open back, but it's also got the drawback of not sealing out external noise and also not preventing as much leakage of what you're listening to, as in your music getting to the outside world. One area that I do think these fall a little bit short is in staging depth. They don't have a great deal of depth and layering in the soundstage, but they also don't feel like a complete wall of sound either. And that for me is one of the key things I look for in headphones is, do they give me a sense that I'm sitting listening to a band as opposed to just a flat panel of sound? And these do get closer to a natural performance than a flat wall of sound, but things are relatively left and right. And so there's not a huge amount to say about a budget headphone like this one in isolation. It's got a slightly warm, slightly thick sound, slightly V-shaped, decent detail and resolution when listening in isolation without anything to compare it to. And I think the staging is excellent for the price you're paying. But that of course leads us to the question of whether or not they're worth the money, whether or not there's other headphones for a little bit more money or the same money that might actually be better. And as I looked around what I've got on hand and what I've reviewed in the past, there's very little that actually competes with the Black Hole. There's nothing that I've tried at or below the price of the Black Hole that I think comes even close to what these do. And then if you start to go a little bit more expensive, you've got options like the Thieaudio Ghost, which I don't have here anymore. I didn't mind them, but I didn't love them. And I think overall I do prefer the tuning, the sense of space, and definitely the build quality of the Black Hole. To me, that's vastly superior to the Thieaudio Ghost. Now, I know there's die-hard Ghost fans out there that will think they're better. That's totally fine. This is a game of preferences. But I think the Black Hole is excellent for the price. It's $30 cheaper than the Ghost, and it's the one I would choose out of the two. And so the next question for me was to go one step higher and think about the Athena. Knowing that in some ways the Black Hole is a little bit of an Athena clone, albeit with different tuning, and seeing that it's very much stealing all the same design cues, I was interested to know if it was actually just as good. The Athena retailed for $179 US, and I say retailed because it's currently sold out. I don't know if they're going to make more. I hope they are because it's a wonderful, wonderful headphone. But I thought it was a good comparison to put the $99 US Black Hole up against its very, very close sibling in the $179 Athena. I say close sibling in terms of close in design, not in price. And so connecting both headphones to a source chain, which was the Chord Dave with the M scaler and the Burson Audio Voyager headphone amp, so a really top-end chain, connecting both of these up to that source chain and listening to Chains of Love by Ryan Adams, it was immediately evident that the Athena is the more mature sounding headphone. It's got a sense of refinement and a more even-handed tuning that becomes immediately evident. The Athena has a similar amount of bite in the top end to what that sort of V-shapedness of the Black Hole has. Although it's possible that the Athena might have a touch more, it also might be that it seems like it's a touch more because it doesn't have quite the same bass emphasis. Either way though, they're quite similar in top end energy. Where things start to get a bit more different other than the bass, and I'll come back around to that in a minute. But other than that, there's also a little bit of upper mid-range bite that comes from the tuning of the Black Holes. And I think that's because they're a little bit uneven. There's some deeper troughs and some taller peaks compared to those troughs, and that can often result in a more fatiguing, more bitey sound because of the contrast between different frequencies. So our ears kind of get a bit of a shock, you could say. That's a very layman's way of saying it, but it's almost like the contrast between a frequency that's here and a frequency that's here in terms of its output from the Black Hole. Those can cause a bit of a shock and a bit of fatigue to our ears. And you don't get as much of that on the Athena, and it's therefore a slightly more refined listen, as I said before. Ultimately, I think it's going to come down to where each person's sensitivities lie, though. Because some people are going to find that having a little bit less bass from the Athenas makes the treble seem a little bit more prominent, and therefore if your sensitivities lie where the treble is on the Athena, they might actually be more fatiguing for you. Whereas on the other hand, those of you that are more like me might find the upper mid-range to be a bit more fatiguing on the Black Hole. Now, to be clear, neither is a particularly fatiguing headphone, but as you do crank up the volume, it's in the upper mids that I get the issues from the Black Hole, and it's in the treble that I get the issues from the Athena. The Black Hole does also have a slightly bitey treble, not quite as much as the Athena though, and so that's why overall I'm saying the Athena comes across as the more refined overall sound, the more mature overall sound, and for me the slightly more enjoyable sound. What that also translates to is that there's a better sense of separation, resolution, space. All those technicalities are just a little bit better on the Athena to my ears. Now some of that could come down to the driver performance between the two if they're using different drivers. But it also could come down to the fact that we've got a slightly more linear, slightly more even-handed tuning on the Athena, and that can result in our ears being able to better pick out everything they need to hear without any gaps or holes in between. And so I think overall the Athena is probably the more correct tuning. I think it's closer to neutral, and in fact I think it's one of the more neutral headphones I've got in my collection. So from a reference point of view, I think the Athena is brilliant. And that means that some people are going to love it for that, whilst others will really like the Black Hole for its bass emphasis. It is a warmer, thicker headphone, as I said before, and some are going to love it for that. Unfortunately, the result of it is that it creates a slightly more uneven tuning. You do get that suck out through the mid-range, and you end up with a slightly V-shaped, slightly peaky sound in some areas, but some people are going to absolutely love it. And so as I went back and forth between these, I definitely enjoy, as I've already said, I definitely enjoy the Athena more. But I can see a lot of people really enjoying the Black Hole, particularly at the money. For $99 I don't think anything comes close to these. As I said, the Thieaudio Ghost is a nice headphone, but the build quality is very poor compared to these, and also I think the tuning is a little bit treble happy, it's a little bit lean in the bass. In some ways, these go the other direction, so that leans into my preferences, so of course I'm going to say that because I do like a bit more bass. But these are a slightly more relaxed and therefore more enjoyable listen because of that extra warmth. That's just my take on it, yours might vary, and that's totally okay. And so I'm not going to draw this out any longer than it needs to be. It's a $99 headphone. I don't think we need to go into too much depth on them, because the short answer is they sound great. They're good if you like a slightly richer, warmer sound, and their ability to produce a large, spacious soundstage for a $99 semi-closed headphone is excellent. And so from a sound quality point of view, I'm definitely going to recommend these. And then it's worth talking just briefly about the accessories, the comfort, the fit, etc. of these. As we take a quick look at the headphones, they're a very simple design. They've got this same headband that we've seen on multiple headphones now from HarmonicDyne, and it's fine. I don't necessarily like the look of the top of it. It does look a bit cheap and plasticky, but all the parts that you interact with feel good. Everything feels solid, sturdy, and well made. You've got these pretty kind of fake Damascus looking inserts here, and that's to pick up on the fact that the cups themselves are just a really simple flat aluminium finish. It's a black, it looks like it's painted aluminium, but it's just a simple, subtle, understated design. As you can see, you get some rotation of the cup, so comfort is not a problem, and the pads they're using are also excellent. They've got a large cutout, moderate, not huge depth in the pads, but enough that most people are going to have no issues with their ears touching the inside of the pads. And the pads themselves use a velour or Alcantara type fabric on the outer edges and a perforated leatherette on the inside. While we're looking at the cups, you'll notice that there's vents all around the outside of the cups, and that's for the venting system that makes these semi-closed instead of closed, and I'm assuming that's a large part of how they're getting such good tonality on a closed back headphone, but also how they're getting that excellent sense of space and staging. Now, unfortunately for those looking for isolation from a closed back headphone, these won't do much of that because of those vents. As a result of this being a semi-closed headphone, it's only going to drop out about 4 to 5 decibels of the outside noise. So it's definitely not a completely open design, but compared to something like a basic Audio-Technica ATH M50X, that's going to reduce your outside noise by around about 8 decibels. So it's nearly halving, not quite, but nearly halving the outside noise getting into your ears, whereas these aren't getting close to that. And remember that the decibel scale is logarithmic, so the difference between 0 to 4 dB, which is what these are kind of producing, is not as big as the jump from 4 dB to 8 dB. So the ATH M50X is exponentially better at isolating noise, and that's because it's fully closed versus these being semi-opened. Now again, if all those numbers mean nothing to you, all you need to take away from this is that the black holes will isolate a little bit of sound. They'll also potentially leak a little bit of sound of you, what you're listening to, out into the outside world. And so if you do need lots of isolation, you will need to find a true closed back. And then the final thing to mention is the cable that you get with the black holes. And it's not as nice as what came with the Athena. The Athena came with a lovely cable. This is much more basic, but it's nice enough. It's a nice, soft, easy to work with, fabric wrapped cable with good quality terminations at each end. It uses 3.5mm terminations, so it's very easy to get a different cable or use an existing upgrade cable that you might already have. And so all in all, I think the total package of the Black Hole is excellent. They're a nice looking headphone, they're comfortable to wear, they're easy to listen to, and the performance is solid. If you asked me to choose between the Black Hole and the Athena, given the budget, if you have enough money, I would go for the Athena. But if you want to keep to that $99, say $100 price level cap, then I think it's very hard to go past the Black Hole. So they're going to get not quite a strong recommendation, but a recommendation from me. The thing that holds me back from a strong recommendation is they are that slightly thicker, richer sound that's not going to suit everybody, and the slightly uneven sound from the mid-range suck out that is a part of that tuning. But if that sounds like a tuning that might suit you, if you want a slightly more relaxed, slightly richer sounding headphone rather than something that's purely neutral, then I think the HarmonicDyne Black Hole is an absolute great choice. And so, as always, I hope you found this video useful, helpful and informative. If you have, please hit the like button, and subscribe and ring the notification bell if you haven't already. But for now, let me leave it to the music, so happy listening, be kind to each other, and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.